Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this hearing of the horrors of the black market of baby organ harvesting and the practice of abortion. I'd especially like to thank our witnesses today, Daleiden and Terrisa Bukovinac. In my capacity as an elected member of the United States House of Representatives, I'm holding this hearing to conduct oversight and explore potential legislative action that could be pursued in light of these illegal practices. Today, we will investigate the violent and abhorrent truths of the abortion industrial complex. Actors such as Planned Parenthood, the University of Pittsburgh, the University of California, San Diego, the Washington Sergei Abortion Clinic, and others have taken unconscionable actions to profit off the murder of unborn babies. And just to recap some statistics about abortion, since it's widely talked about in the news and also in campaigns and elections, there are some states that have some sort of laws where there are that ban abortions to an extent. But to be clear for everyone to know, abortion is widely available in every single state in the United States of America. The three exceptions always apply. States whose laws essentially allow abortion on demand through birth. There are 26 of these states: Alaska, California, Colorado, Connecticut, Delaware, DC, Hawaii, Illinois, Kansas, Maine, Maryland, Massachusetts, Michigan, Minnesota, Montana, Nevada, New Hampshire, New Jersey, New Mexico, New York, Ohio, Oregon, Pennsylvania, Rhode Island, Vermont, Virginia, Washington, and Washington, D.C. In other words, how widely available is abortion? Overall, abortion is still widely available in the United States. People who live in states with so-called bans have proven willing to travel to nearby states to have an abortion. For example, Illinois saw an over 50% increase in abortions in the year after Dobbs and is surrounded by red states where strong pro-life laws went into effect. There are many reasons why women have an abortion, but statistically, less than 1% of abortions are due to rape and incest. Black women are among the highest, 41.5%. That's according to the CDC in 2021, having abortions. White women at 30.2%, Hispanic women 21.8%, and other races are 6.5%. Abortion reporting is difficult, though. They're always years behind in the statistics and the tracking on how many abortions occur. And all 50 states are not necessarily required to report their abortion statistics. California, Maryland, and New Hampshire do not report. There are different abortion methods, and I think it's important to talk about them. There's an abortion pill. Over 50% of abortions occur through the 2-pill regimen, which first starves the baby in the womb to death and then requires the mother to deliver a dead baby. Providers often instruct women to administer their own abortions at home. There's D&C, dilation and curettage. D&C is a first trimester surgical abortion performed typically on babies between 5 and 13 weeks of pregnancy. After administering anesthesia, the abortionist inserts a speculum which opens the woman's cervix and continues to use metal dilators to further open the cervix. While the baby is still alive, the abortionist inserts a suction catheter, which is 10 to 20 times more powerful than a household vacuum. A curette, which is a long-handled curved blade, is then inserted to scrape the lining of the uterus to ensure there are no remaining body parts. Alec, could you please put up the graphic of abortion instruments? Thank you. And make sure that all are shown. Thank you. Then there's another method, D&E, dilation and evacuation. This is a second trimester surgical abortion that is typically performed between 13 and 24 weeks. It's performed over the course of 2 to 3 days, in which the woman's cervix is dilated using a form of sterilized seaweed 24 to 48 hours before the procedure. When she goes to the clinic, she is anesthetized, and while her baby is alive, her baby is sucked out little by little using a cannula, a vacuum-like instrument. If the child is too large for this method, the abortionist will use clamps to grab pieces of the baby, crush him or her, and remove the child from the womb piece by piece. There's also an induction procedure. This is often used in a third trimester abortion performed sometime around 25 weeks all the way to full term. The baby is almost fully developed and can survive outside the womb. This procedure can take 3 to 4 days to complete. On day 1, a chemical digoxin is injected into the baby to cause fetal cardiac arrest and kill the baby. The sterilized seaweed is used to open the cervix for the delivery of a stillborn baby. While she waits for her cervix to be dilated, she has to carry her dead baby inside of her for several days. She will then go to the clinic to have her baby delivered. If the baby cannot be delivered whole, a D&E will be performed. The baby will be delivered whole. However, sometimes the woman will not be able to make it back to the clinic in time and may deliver the baby at her home, her house, her hotel room, or wherever she is. Then the abortionist will come and deliver and clean up. Then there's partial birth abortions. Partial birth abortions are banned under federal law. However, undercover videos released by CMP show that abortionists have changed procedures to perform partial birth abortions. These procedures result in the baby being partially delivered, and then an instrument such as scissors are used to tear or perforate the skull. Now, why am I describing the graphic and horrific methods of abortion? The reason why I'm describing that is because we don't really talk about abortion when we talk about abortion. Legislators like Congresswoman Miller and I, you usually see us on television or in hearings or on the House floor talking about abortion, calling it women's reproductive health care. I don't think anything I describe sounds like reproductive health care. As a matter of fact, it's the exact opposite. The other problem about talking about abortion while we're talking about abortion is that most people refuse to really talk about abortion. And while we are not condemning any woman at all, no women are being condemned today. We're talking about what an abortion actually is. It's the murder of a child. It's the murder of a human being. And then what happens to the babies, the human beings after they have been killed. And I think many women should know that. I think that's the part that women don't know, and it's completely unfair. Our witnesses today will speak about their investigative work in the abortion industry. Several of the findings include undercover videos of Planned Parenthood executives and abortionists discussing their illegal work, the stitching of aborted baby scalps onto mice for HIV and vaccine research, the University of California, San Diego granting Planned Parenthood ownership of all patents and intellectual property developed through the research and experiments using the supplied fetal tissue, and the University of Pittsburgh using a research technique which calls for aborting late-term fetuses alive via labor induction and then cutting them open to harvest their livers. Furthermore, we will learn more about the 5 second and third trimester babies known as Justice for the 5, who were tragically discovered to have been partially born alive, murdered, and then disposed of to an energy company. Before we turn it over to our witnesses for their opening statements, I'd like to briefly introduce them. David Daleiden is a journalist with nearly a decade of experience in conducting investigative research on the abortion industry. In 2013, David started the Center for Medical Progress, CMP, to pursue impactful investigative journalism, protected projects pertaining to contemporary bioethical issues, including abortion. Prior to CMP, David worked as a director of research for a national media education and advocacy organization. David is a graduate of Claremont McKenna College. His writings have appeared in various publications, and he has appeared on several radio and television broadcasts to discuss the important work he does. Thank you, David, for being here. Terrisa Bukovinac is a progressive activist, founder, and national leader in the American pro-life movement. For nearly a decade, she has worked through a secular framework to address the tragedy of abortion violence on demand in America. She was a co-discoverer of the 5 late-term aborted babies that were discovered at an abortion clinic in DC in 2022. Terrisa is the founder of Progressive Anti-Abortion Uprising, PAAU, a left-wing pro-life organization which has become an important voice in the political activism landscape. She is the former president of Democrats for Life of America and previously founded a group called Pro-Life San Francisco, who exposes the horrors of fetal organ harvesting at the University of California, San Francisco. Terrisa, thank you for being here. I'd now like to turn it over to Mr. Daleiden for his opening statement.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Representative. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today. My name is David Daleiden. I'm the founder and president of the Center for Medical Progress, a nonprofit investigative journalism organization that focuses on bioethical issues that impact human dignity, with a special focus on the trafficking and harvesting of aborted babies for experimentation. Before we begin today, I want to acknowledge that some of the many people viewing this hearing may have had a personal experience with abortion, and to express my concern that the taxpayer-funded abortion industry should never be in a position to exploit the circumstances that may have led you to have that experience. And also to note that what we will discuss today may be graphic. My organization is responsible for the series of undercover video reports in 2015 that caught Planned Parenthood's top-level leadership callously negotiating the harvesting and sale of aborted baby body parts. I'd like to play some of that footage now.
We've been very good at getting parts on liver because we know that so I'm not going to crush that part. I'm going to basically crush below, I'm going to crush above, and I'm going to see if I can get it intact. A lot of people want intact parts these days. They're looking for specific nodes, AB nodes, SA. I was like, wow, I didn't even know. Good for them. Yesterday was the first time she said people wanted lungs. And then, like I said, always as many intact livers as possible.
What would you expect for intact tissue? What sort of compensation? What sort of...
Well, why don't you start by telling me what you're used to paying? I want a Lamborghini. I want a Lamborghini.
Because that's how we're going to keep you happy,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
To make sure that financially
Yes.
you're growing your clinic and however you need to say that, frame it on the other end.
Yes.
So if we alter our process and we are able to obtain intact fetal cadavers, it's all just a matter of line items.
My undercover work in the abortion industry and subsequent investigative reporting has shown me a very dark and broken side of humanity. I've watched the handling of dismembered babies inside some of the biggest Planned Parenthood abortion centers in the country, while their research officials discussed how to disguise the sales. I've met with dozens of Planned Parenthood's top abortion providers at their lavish commercial abortion trade shows, sponsored by companies buying baby parts. At these trade shows, I consumed far more alcoholic beverages with abortion providers than my liver would like to admit, as they talked about the harvesting and sale of aborted baby livers. Sometimes I actually saw them start to tear up, describing the tiny brains and hearts and feet of premature babies that they dismember and brutalize before selling them, only to then see them steel themselves and shake it off as they tried to suppress the heresy of human feelings that the dogma of industrial-scale abortion cannot allow. I'll never forget when early on in my research, a whistleblower from fetal body parts company STEM Express told me about the biggest liver her lab had ever sold from a baby aborted at 5 months at the Planned Parenthood in Sacramento, California. They took the stem cells from the liver, put them in a vial, and sold them for $17,000 to another taxpayer-funded laboratory. Planned Parenthood says 75% of abortions take place because of financial problems. $17,000 might have been somebody's rent money for the next year. But for the abortion clinics selling and the government-funded laboratories buying, that 5-month-old baby was worth more dead than alive. I've also witnessed the apparent apathy of too many public officials in the face of such barbarism. It led one of my undercover investigators to remark in exasperation, if we asked STEM Express to ship a baby's head to the sheriff's doorstep, would they care more then? That was an ethical line that I did not feel like we could cross. I wish the taxpayer-funded clinics and laboratories involved shared the same views. Recent government-sponsored experiments on aborted baby parts involve stitching the scalps of 5-month-old aborted babies onto lab rats to keep the baby hair growing on the rodents. This was done at the University of Pittsburgh to develop a new experimental platform to sell to Big Pharma. FOIA documents we recently reported on show the fetal tissue bank at Pitt is under federal law enforcement investigation by the HHS Office of Inspector General. But since Congress members requested this investigation 3 years ago, there has been no update from the OIG. But our investigative reporting is ongoing. 2 weeks ago, we broke the story about a contract Planned Parenthood has with the University of California, where Planned Parenthood and UC San Diego agree for Planned Parenthood to sell its, quote, proprietary aborted fetuses in exchange for the, quote, valuable consideration of ownership of the patents and intellectual property the university develops using them, which could be worth millions of dollars in ongoing royalties. The transfer of any aborted fetal tissue for, quote, valuable consideration is a federal felony. But describing aborted babies as proprietary means Planned Parenthood thinks they own them and have a right to sell them. Whatever the total amount of the sales, this contract is irrefutable proof of Planned Parenthood's criminal mens rea to sell aborted baby body parts in violation of federal law. The abortion industry, led by Planned Parenthood, is a powerful special interest in our country. They fight to silence reporting on their black market of aborted baby organ harvesting, and the ongoing cover-up goes to the highest levels of our government. Kamala Harris, as the Planned Parenthood-endorsed Attorney General of California in 2016, raided my apartment to seize hundreds of hours of unreleased undercover footage. Some of the biggest Planned Parenthood abortion centers got a federal judge in San Francisco, who previously opened and funded a Planned Parenthood clinic, to issue a federal injunction against the release of the remaining footage. I and my organization now face a total $25 million fine for our investigative reporting. I guess being able to continue to sell baby parts is worth at least $25 million to Planned Parenthood. Aborted babies are only valuable for Planned Parenthood to harvest and sell, and for government-funded laboratories to buy, precisely because they are human beings just like us. But the message that our civilization needs now more than ever is that the value of every human being is infinite. At a time when powerful government and media forces are trying to silence this message, and well-meaning public officials sometimes struggle to find their voice, it is imperative for the People's House to reopen formal investigations of the black market in aborted baby organ harvesting so that taxpayer-funded entities can never put a price tag on human beings. Thank you.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here. I am the founder of Progressive Anti-Abortion Uprising. I'm also an atheist. Progressive Anti-Abortion Uprising organizes activists for direct action, but also opposes abortion through a leftist lens. But in 2016, I left my corporate career in fashion to found my first organization, Pro-Life San Francisco. I wanted to help families in crisis, and I wanted to be a voice for the unborn in one of the most pro-abortion cities on the planet. But soon after, I learned that the top abortion training program in the country was headquartered at the University of California, San Francisco. It's called the Ryan Residency. And I also found out that UCSF was engaged in some very high-profile fetal tissue research projects. Alec, could you put up that first slide for me? This is just showing that by 2016, they had trained nearly 3,000 OBGYNs to perform abortions. And you can go to the next slide. So one of these studies that I found out that they were involved in involved humanizing the immune systems of cohorts of mice. And according to the National Institutes of Health, this project required 2 pristine, electively aborted fetuses per month. And the notes in the study suggest that all of them were between the ages of 18 and 24 weeks. That means that many of them were viable and could survive outside of the womb if provided medical care. You can go to the next slide. So UCSF, according to their own online public training modules, performs second trimester abortions 2 ways, either through D&E, a dismemberment procedure, or through a labor induction. Now, because feticidal injections like digoxin, which you mentioned in your opening statement, cannot be used in cases where the fetus is intended for research because it destroys the stem cells. Because of that reason, we know that these dismemberment procedures are being done on fully live, pain-capable, and sometimes viable babies. And the next slide. According to the Society of Family Planning, which is a pro-choice organization and backed up recently by the University of Vienna, labor induction abortions without the use of digoxin past 20 weeks produces born-alive infants half of the time. This raises very serious concerns about the treatment of abortion survivors in these research scenarios. Now, the Humanized Mouse Project went on for nearly 20 years and received almost $30 million from the federal government alone. Last year, you can see in 2022, the federal government spent $57 million on fetal tissue research. And so in the years that I've been battling with the university over public records requests, I finally was given access to some of the fetal tissue logs that came to me in the form of dozens of these types of emails. You'll see the one at the bottom says, the sample I collected today, gut and spleen. Have a great weekend and Thanksgiving. Next to it, you'll see pelvis, external genitalia, pelvis, external genitalia, lower half of body. There are just dozens of emails like this. Now, it has been 8 years since the Select Panel on Infant Lives gave more than a dozen criminal referrals for several abortion industry entities. And from what I can tell, the DOJ has done nothing. It is really disturbing that private citizens like David and I have had to go in and battle with these universities over records that the DOJ has already had. And this negligence has spanned 3 presidential administrations. Now, on March 25th, 2022, if you can go to the next slide, my colleague Lauren Handy and I went to the Washington Surgery Center. This was after I founded Progressive Anti-Abortion Uprising. We were going to this clinic to help moms in crisis. But when we got there, I took this photo of this truck that was parked outside Curtis Bay Medical Waste Services. You can see the boxes here on the dolly. We approached the driver and convinced him to give us the box. When we opened the box, inside were the remains of 115 aborted fetuses and embryos. 5 of them were very late term. Experts believe them to be the ages of 24 and 33 weeks. Now, 2 of them were completely whole, and given their gestational age, that's a good indication that they were likely born alive. There was a third that I would like to show you, but it is a very graphic image. I wanted to warn you before, but that's okay. You went for it anyways. This is a baby girl we named Harriet. She, as you can see, she is totally intact, but at the base of her skull, there is an incision where it appears that her brain has been suctioned out and her skull has been crushed. These are hallmark wounds of an illegal partial birth abortion procedure. Now, these babies were not intended for fetal tissue research. They were headed for an incinerator, a Curtis Bay incinerator, to provide renewable energy for the city of Baltimore. You can go to the next slide. This is my colleague, Lauren Handy. Now, the DOJ has also seemingly done nothing to investigate the deaths of the 5, but they did spend time and resources prosecuting and ultimately convicting my friend Lauren under the FACE Act for doing a totally nonviolent sit-in at that same clinic where we found the babies. And these are the other defendants that stood trial with her. They are all in prison right now awaiting sentencing. They've been in prison for more than 7 months. You can go to the next slide. Oh, there wasn't one. Okay, yeah. So Lauren and I, we have literally seen the victims of abortion extremism. We have held them in our own hands. We have looked at them face to face. Okay, they were not trash to be burned. They were not spare parts to be experimented on. They were human beings just like you and me. Now, I'm going to conclude my opening testimony with a video that I took that day that we opened the box. What you're watching is my colleague Lauren opening the first bucket that we opened, which contained the remains of a baby boy we named Christopher X. The voice you hear on the video is mine. This is extremely graphic, so I want to warn you, but I'm so happy to be here today. I'm so grateful, and I look forward to hearing your questions. Thank you.
He was born. I think he was like. He's whole.
He's whole.
He's whole.
Oh my God. Oh, rest in peace, little baby. Fuck these people. This is not fucking okay.
Okay. I don't know what to do next.
Where is the deacon?
He's right here.
Okay, little baby. It's okay. It's okay. He was definitely. He was born alive. A little boy. It's okay. It's okay, little boy. That's okay. Oh, sorry. Oh, sorry.
Thank you, Terrisa. That was the video that you had opened the box. That was there were buckets inside of the box. Is that correct?
Yes, when we first cut it open, there was a mountain of small turquoise containers. They all had the date and I believe the parents' initials on them. And as we unpacked dozens of those, over 100, we did discover a bag at the bottom of the box with 5 much larger buckets and one a little bit larger than the rest, which is the first one we opened.
Is that the video we just watched?
Yes.
First, it has to be said that there aren't words to describe that video. And, being a mother myself and have delivered 3 children, that is appalling and very difficult to watch. I'm sure it's extremely difficult for people watching this hearing to see. That's not what we just saw in the video is not tissue or a clump of cells, as so many women tragically believe when they go to have an abortion. Do you know the approximate gestational age of that baby?
Experts believe him to be around 33 weeks.
Very viable, completely viable.
Absolutely.
So just to be clear, that's a baby that if it were born could easily live.
Yes.
Yes. And again, of course, we are not holding judgment on any of the women. We're looking at the reality of an abortion. Did you examine the baby? How was the baby killed?
There were no wounds on him. And so given his advanced gestational age, it appears that he was likely just delivered alive and placed in that solution where we found him.
So this is a 3rd trimester abortion clinic here in Washington, D.C. Is that correct?
Yes.
What abortion clinic is that?
It's the Washington Surgery Center. operated by Cesare Santangelo.
Can you tell me about Santangelo?
He has harmed women, and he has been doing abortions through all trimesters for several decades here in Washington, D.C.
Has he ever been, for harming women, has he ever been prosecuted in any way?
I believe that people have tried, but not successfully, and he is still a member of the National Abortion Federation.
Is there any of these women, former patients of his testimonies or filed complaints anywhere?
Yes, there is definitely paperwork on that.
Okay, is that something you can provide to us later?
Yes.
Okay, great. Tell me a little bit more about the evidence of the babies' bodies. Do you believe these were victims of partial birth abortion?
I believe Harriet was, yes. Now, the other 2 of the 5 were fully dismembered. So I think that it's very unlikely that we'll get justice for them. But the 2 that were completely whole, Christopher X and Phoenix, they definitely appear to. There's a high probability that they were born alive, and an autopsy might be able to help us determine that.
Mm-hmm. And if the other babies that were aborted and they were dismembered, that's because of the size they were. Is that correct?
I think it just kind of depends on how the procedure goes. I think that, Santangelo's likely just trying to get the procedure done however he can. And sometimes that might require dismembering them before you can extract the parts from their parent.
This is brutal and horrific. Cutting a baby apart in order to remove it from a woman's womb. Do you believe that to be women's reproductive health care?
I do not.
Do you believe that to be a right?
I do not.
I don't either. So can you tell me a little bit further about what's going to be done with their bodies? What was done with those boxes?
So we did allow 110 of them to be buried by a priest in an undisclosed location. We handed over the 5 largest ones to the DC police, asking for autopsies. And when it happened, several members of Congress also issued letters asking the Department of Justice to investigate, demanding an autopsy from DCPD. As far as we know, that has not happened. It's been 2 years since then. We are confident that the bodies remain in the hands of the medical examiner, but we don't have any we don't have anything planned in terms of how we're going to get justice for these babies.
Now, these 3rd trimester abortions that are happening here in Washington, D.C., are they happening anywhere else in the country or across the country?
Sure. Yeah, they're happening in many states, especially like I mentioned, in California. They're certainly happening there for the purposes of fetal tissue research. There are several other states that have no gestational limits where we know they're performing all trimester abortions, like in Colorado and Maryland and New York and now probably Michigan and many other states who have passed recent ballot initiatives that will allow them to perform abortions through all trimesters.
Is this, does the abortion industry stand for social justice?
You cannot be an anti-capitalist and support the abortion industry. You cannot be anti-fascist and believe that it is okay to mass murder children. We can't build a more progressive society on a pile of dead babies.
I don't think so either. Thank you very much. Now we would like to play several videos that were subpoenaed by the Oversight Committee and used in their investigation and criminal referrals. These illustrate graphic details of Planned Parenthood chief medical officers and abortionists discussing their illegal work. Let's go ahead and Mr. Daleiden, I'm going to let you tell us about these clips and we can go ahead and play the first clip.
So I'm not afraid of undercutting the competition. Well, I just went into this, and it was very good. And we've gone through our first year. Yeah. I mean, I was looking
Can you give us context of that clip?
Certainly. So that is a video clip from a conversation that I remember very well. That particular piece of footage was filmed by one of my fellow undercover investigators on the team that I trained in 2013. That is a video clip from a fancy exhibit hall reception at a top abortion industry trade show in 2015. These are the trade shows put on by the National Abortion Federation, which is basically a proxy group for Planned Parenthood. It's the biggest trade group of abortion providers in North America. At least half of their membership is Planned Parenthood, and about half of their board leadership is Planned Parenthood affiliated. That particular clip shows one of the conference sponsors of that trade show discussing her abortion clinics in the Seattle, Washington area that at the time were contracted with the company STEM Express, which is a biotech company that had the business model of going into abortion clinics around the country, purchasing the aborted baby parts from the abortion clinics, and then turning around and reselling them to various taxpayer-funded researchers around the country. And in that clip, the clinic director is stating that she had projections of making $250,000 a year off of selling aborted baby parts to STEM Express.
Her personally or
Her clinic.
her clinic? Thank you. Let's go ahead and play clip 2.
I mean, we could pay you $1,000 up to $1,500 for a liver.
Yeah.
Because that's in such high demand from our.
How interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. It's just great. And I think the fact that there's for me, it's just like somebody to take it would be great. But I think financial incentive from you guys is going to be like to the people we have to get this approved will be very happy about it. So.
Right. The financial incentive would make people happy.
Yeah, exactly.
Is that what I'm hearing you say?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
Did I hear her say the financial incentive would make people happy?
Yes, that's what you heard. That was the abortion services medical director for Planned Parenthood of New York City, which is one of the biggest Planned Parenthood abortion centers in the entire country.
Let's go ahead and play the third clip.
You know, I would much rather do 3 or 4 passes than 15.
Right. Is that your average, like 3 to 4 passes to remove everything, or? Yeah. John's listening in. She's like, you take notes, son. You keep track of. Yeah. Oh, you probably do actually. Yeah.
It depends. I mean, there are some that are like, I need you to make one more pass. Like avoid PBA. Yeah. I'm like,
to avoid the federal law.
Too close. I was like,
oh, wait, so you're sitting there like coaching her, like watching how to.
No. But I mean, we know, right? Like if I'm doing a procedure and
it's
seeing
breached,
that I'm in fear that it's about to come to the umbilicus, I might ask for a second set of forceps. Hold the body at the cervix and pull off the leg.
Oh, so you get okay.
So it's not
right.
PBA.
So that's where if you've got it coming out to umbilicus and that torso area is also intact, that's when I start to get excited because that's all the organs in there that were right there.
I find that even if I can't get it out intact, I can still get you a good sample.
Now, if you just do a disarticulation though, while sitting, so you'll pop a leg off or whatever, then you're free, right? Like it counts, and so then you can just bring the rest of it through all in one piece because you've already done a disarticulation.
Correct.
Yeah.
And usually at that point,
And obviously, and you probably do the whole intent statement thing and all of that with the feelings. Yeah.
I'm sorry, I'm a little shocked. Did I just hear her say that if she can get a leg or if she can dismember the baby in any way possible, then she's passed the federal ban? Is that what she was saying, the federal law? So if she can pop off a leg, then it's no longer illegal. Is that what she was saying?
Yeah, so there's several different things going on in that clip. That is a conversation that I remember very well that I had with the chief medical officer of Planned Parenthood Gulf Coast, which is one of the biggest Planned Parenthood. It's among the top. It used to be among the top Planned Parenthood abortion centers in the country. Now, abortion is illegal, is a felony in Texas. So that clinic has been, as far as being an abortion clinic, has been shut down. But that's a conversation with the chief medical officer of Planned Parenthood Gulf Coast, as well as their vice president of abortion access, together with the two of them. This is a conversation that I had with them undercover, discussing how we might be able to set up a contract for Planned Parenthood Gulf Coast selling aborted fetuses and aborted fetal body parts to our test undercover company to then turn around and resell to taxpayer-funded researchers. And in that clip, what the chief medical officer is describing is how they think that they can try and skirt the federal law against partial birth abortion, where if the baby is coming out of the mother, is being pulled out of the mother with the forceps past the baby's umbilical cord, which is one of the anatomical landmarks, which is written into the federal partial birth abortion law, that if they're afraid that it's getting too close to an obvious partial birth abortion situation, that the doctor will take one set of forceps, hold the body of the 4 or 5 or 6 month old baby at the woman's cervix, and then use a second set of forceps to pull off a leg or two from the fetus, and then allow the rest of the baby to be delivered. Now, you heard me say in the clip undercover, that's when I started to get excited, because as a fetal organ harvester, that means that the baby's torso is still going to be intact, which means that you're going to have access to all of the body parts within the torso, the heart, the lungs, the liver, the kidneys. But obviously the baby, just pulling off, one leg from a baby who's 5 months old is not going to immediately kill the baby. That baby will still be alive, being delivered. It's just a live baby being delivered, missing one leg. So what the chief medical officer of Planned Parenthood Gulf Coast is describing in that clip is mutilating a 4 or 5 or 6 month old baby while it's being delivered in order to try to cover up their violation of the federal partial birth abortion law in order to sell more aborted baby body parts. And the second thing that you heard her say in that clip is that they use what Planned Parenthood National calls an intent statement, where there's actually a checkbox in their medical forms. And this is mandated by Planned Parenthood National to all of their regional offices around the country, where there's an intent statement where the doctor is supposed to check a box before doing the late-term abortion saying, I do not intend to do a partial birth abortion, basically. And they feel that immunizes them from any accusations of having done a partial birth abortion because they, quote unquote, did not intend to do that. As the national medical director, the senior director of medical services at PPFA told me undercover, quote, what ultimately happens doesn't matter so long as they check the box beforehand. It's obviously it's a legal fiction. It's almost like saying, I do not intend to rob a bank, and then going and robbing a bank. It's still a crime. And the federal Fifth Circuit actually pointed this out a couple of years ago when a Planned Parenthood lawyer tried to defend this in front of them. But that's exactly what you're hearing in this undercover video clip from the leadership of formerly one of the biggest Planned Parenthood abortion centers in the country.
Mr. Daleiden, are any of those people in jail?
No.
Why not?
I don't have complete personal knowledge about that, but as far as I can tell, it's because the federal investigations of Planned Parenthood for trafficking aborted baby body parts and committing partial birth abortions, those federal investigations stalled. And justice has not been done in that case yet.
So these people are talking about barbarically ripping apart live babies so that they can deliver an intact torso so that they can then harvest their organs to sell to people that are buying their organs. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And these people are not in jail?
Correct.
Thank you. Can we play the next clip, please?
My coping mechanism is to focus on the baby fetus. Reverence for something that was once alive and now it's not. That's the hard part about this stigma. I have an issue with patient pain, It makes me feel like I'm a bad person inflicting pain. I take that home with me, and I have a really hard time with it. Another. An eyeball just fell down into my lap, and that is gross. And but I'm saying to myself, this abortion is going well, and it's going safely, so I'm fine.
So that clip started out in what it sounded like remorse, but really was the beginning of a punchline.
Yeah, that is a clip from a presentation that was being given by the individual who is responsible for running and managing Planned Parenthood's abortion training programs all across the country. They're managed out of UCSF, out of the University of California, San Francisco. So Terrisa mentioned the Ryan Residency Training Program, which is paired with the Fellowship in Complex Family Planning. It's sort of a 2-track abortion doctor level up program that Planned Parenthood has been running for the past almost 30 years now, I think 20, 25 years. Run originally out of UC San Francisco, University of Pittsburgh, and UC San Diego were some of the early adopters of this training program. So it tends to be associated around the country with places that are hotbeds for fetal experimentation as well. So that's the national director of that program on that clip, who is reading quotes from what they call psychosocial workshops and values clarification workshops for the medical students and the newly minted doctors that they are training and grooming to do later and later abortion procedures. And as most people might expect, if it becomes your job week after week, month after month to go in and do 20 to 30 to 40 dismemberment abortions on 4 and 5 and 6 month old babies every weekend, most people start to, even people who are very committed to a pro-abortion ideology, start to have a really difficult time with that. And so you're hearing her read quotes from some of these workshops and some of these seminars with abortion doctors in training saying, my coping mechanism is to focus on reverence for the baby that was once alive and now it's dead because I killed it through the abortion. And then you're also hearing her describe one of them talk about doing an abortion and the eyeball of the baby fell down into their lap, and that's gross. And then you hear this is an audience of 200 to 300 late-term abortion doctors in this fancy hotel room, and they all laugh and applaud. By the way, the CEO of one of the main federal contractors for supplying aborted baby organs to the NIH and the NIH-funded researchers, Advanced Bioscience Resources, was seated in the front row of that seminar, and was one of the people who laughed and applauded the loudest at that line.
It's unbelievable. Okay, let's do the final clip, please.
Picking up some more data. They're like, well, can you show us
So 30 to 50 so-called tissue samples are a good month for an abortion clinic. That's what she was talking about. Tissue being lungs and body parts and organs. Can you elaborate on that conversation?
Yeah, so that's again, this is another conversation with the abortion leadership of Planned Parenthood Gulf Coast, which some viewers may actually be familiar with their now iconic building. It's the big building that looks like a kind of shaped like a cash register, or some people think a ziggurat in Houston. And that is one of that actually until the abortion part of it was shut down after the law took effect in Texas, that was the largest abortion clinic in the Western Hemisphere. So that's one of Planned Parenthood's mega clinics, as they're called. They in this conversation, talking about 30 to 50 specimens of aborted baby body parts per month. That's just the second trimester fetuses that they're talking about. Those are just the later abortions that they're talking about, 30 to 50 a month at that single clinic. In this conversation about, again, a conversation about creating a contract to sell aborted baby body parts to a biotech company. The other line that is interesting in that conversation, and I don't know if I don't know if people caught it. It may have gone by kind of quickly. Is the vice president of abortion access is talking about the quality or the intactness of the aborted babies as they're coming out and what's available. And she says that sometimes they come out really good, and it's like there's only just an arm that's disarticulated. So she's describing, again, a baby that comes out entirely whole except just missing an arm because just the arm has been pulled off with the forceps during the extraction. So again, that's describing a baby that's delivered alive, just missing an arm. And she's describing this as something that historically they have seen at that clinic in Houston.
So these are second trimester babies who do feel pain. They do feel pain.
Of course.
And they're basically brutally murdering them in order to harvest their organs. They call it tissue, but we're talking about lungs. We're talking about livers. We're talking about eyeballs, as they have stated. And they are brutally murdering them in order to get these things. Now, what I'm hearing, and as you said, you've been to these conferences, abortion conferences, to the point where you've talked to so many abortionists, executive directors, people that run these abortion clinics. It sounds like, and can you confirm, the whole goal is to get tissue, so-called tissue, or the whole goal is to get healthy, viable organs that they can sell for research purposes or whatever the purposes are. But it sounds like they are directed to make sure that when they abort a baby, that they are getting body parts that they can sell because it is so lucrative. Is that accurate?
Absolutely. Among the dozens of top-level Planned Parenthood abortion providers that I and my team spoke with at these various meetings, every single one of them agreed to change the way that they were doing their abortions in some way to try to make sure that they could harvest the highest quality saleable body parts.
So let's be very clear with the public. I've never seen a commercial or an ad for a Planned Parenthood or an abortion clinic that said, we are going to make sure that we're able to harvest as many body parts from your baby that you no longer want as possible. I've never seen an ad or a commercial that says that, or a billboard per se. The only ads and commercials I see is trying to appeal to women in crisis who may have an unplanned pregnancy, and are not knowing what to do. And they're saying, come in here. This is where we take care of women's reproductive health care. And they're appealing to women and helping them during a crisis. But when we get behind closed doors, as you have done in your work as a journalist, an independent journalist, you have uncovered what the real truth is. The real truth is it's all for profit off of harvesting the organs and body parts of these unwanted babies, these unwanted human beings. And that's the real truth. Is that an accurate assessment?
So that's a completely accurate assessment. Planned Parenthood is committing really a fraud on the public and on taxpayers. And it's actually, it's sadly very ironic. If you look at the so-called consent forms that they sometimes present to their abortion patients to try to get them to agree to give over the baby body parts, they explicitly promise to the abortion patients, to the pregnant women, that we will not change anything about the way that we do your abortion in order to harvest body parts. But then, as you say, behind closed doors, every single one of them, every single one of the doctors agrees that they'll change the way they do the procedures in order to get the most marketable body parts.
Absolutely. They're willing to rip their arms and legs off. They're willing to change the way they do the procedure. They admitted it themselves in these videos in order to make sure that they can get the tissue. Are they rewarded financially that you have been able to uncover? Are they specifically the doctors, the nurses, maybe the lab technicians, people that work in the abortion clinics? Are they rewarded financially for harvesting a higher number of baby organs or body parts? Is that something you've uncovered?
Yes, there are multiple streams of payments, multiple people getting paid, multiple streams of revenue going into the abortion clinics and the people who work with them or who work in them as a result of harvesting aborted baby body parts. In some cases, when you have an outside biotech company like a STEM Express or ABR going in, the clinic is getting paid a certain amount of money per resellable organ that is harvested from the baby. In other cases, for example, STEM Express, one of the abortion doctors from one of the biggest Planned Parenthood clinics they were working with in Northern California was actually on the payroll at the outside biotech company as well. So the clinic was getting paid and the abortion doctor was getting paid as well. In other cases, like, for example, what CMP just published in the past 2 weeks about this contract that we discovered between Planned Parenthood in Southern California and the University of California, Planned Parenthood is actually selling the aborted fetuses in exchange for ownership of the patents and intellectual property that the University of California develops using the aborted baby body parts, which on its own could be worth up to millions of dollars in ongoing royalties over the years. Interestingly, in the years since that partnership was established between Planned Parenthood and UC San Diego, some of UC San Diego's biggest financial backers then turned around and extended millions of dollars of grant support to Planned Parenthood as well. So there's multiple different streams of a lot of money that flows to Planned Parenthood as a result of these very lucrative research contracts. So lots of people are getting paid for harvesting and selling aborted baby body parts, and it's disgusting.
And they sound very excited about it while they're drinking and carrying on and making jokes. Thank you very much, Mr. Daleiden. I'd like to hand over time to Congresswoman Miller.
Thank you. Good afternoon. However, pregnancy care centers, which the left has relentlessly attacked in recent years, not only provide support to women facing crisis pregnancies, they also provide critical health care, all completely free of charge. And I just so appreciate even how the relationships they build with these women and help them in this time of crisis. Planned Parenthood's goal is to perform as many abortions as possible for maximum profit, regardless of the women they hurt or how many may die from taking mifepristone. It is illegal to perform late-term and partial birth abortions, and it's illegal to use taxpayer funds to perform abortions or abortion-related services. Yet Planned Parenthood continues to get by scot-free, profiting from preying on poor and vulnerable women in crisis situations. Planned Parenthood continues to strategically place their abortion mills in poor and minority neighborhoods. We must call on the Department of Justice and the Department of Health and Human Services to enforce federal law and stop Planned Parenthood from their illegal activities. We must stop funding these centers of death. If Merrick Garland and Xavier Becerra refuse to enforce federal law, we have the power to remove them from office. It is the number one duty of the government to protect its citizens, the littlest citizens too.
Yeah.
We must protect the conscience rights of hardworking American taxpayers who don't want their money going toward eliminating the next generation. Planned Parenthood won't survive if existing federal law is enforced. Their funding will dry up and they will no longer be able to continue harming the women they purport to help, which I think is interesting. They want to help women, but yet they want to keep the women in the dark. They don't want to give them the, require an ultrasound and information given to them so that at the very least, they are making an informed choice. So they are deceiving the women and then they are harming them. We must also call for all charges against David Daleiden and the Center for Medical Progress to be dropped. The work he did to uncover this charade deserves protection. So, Mr. Daleiden, I have a question. What charges and legal costs are you facing from exposing Planned Parenthood?
Thank you. So as I mentioned in my opening, due to retaliatory lawsuits from various Planned Parenthood centers and Planned Parenthood National, very strategically filed in federal court in San Francisco in front of a judge who had formerly opened and run and funded a Planned Parenthood clinic before becoming a federal judge.
Oh my.
We now face a total $25 million fine for our investigative reporting work. The same kind of undercover reporting that many people are familiar with across the country in many states, in California, in New York, and Florida, everywhere. But for doing the same thing that professional undercover journalists do on a regular basis, we're facing a total $25 million fine from a Planned Parenthood judge. And as I also mentioned in my opening, back in 2016, as Attorney General of California, endorsed by Planned Parenthood, Kamala Harris ordered a California DOJ raid on my one-bedroom apartment with explicit instructions from Planned Parenthood to seize the remaining unreleased undercover videos to try to completely prevent them from ever seeing the light of day, ever being used in a congressional hearing or in a congressional investigation. And that case is actually still ongoing, where I and one of my fellow undercover investigators faced the first ever in history felony charges under the California video recording law. This is the first time in the, I think, 70-year history of that law that anyone has ever been criminally prosecuted for undercover news gathering. This is regularly done across the state of California on a weekly basis. Professional television news stations do undercover video reporting in settings far more confidential than the crowded hotel lobbies and public restaurants where my team recorded undercover. And yet we're the only ones who have ever faced charges under that recording law. There's been a lot of development in First Amendment law recently that really calls into question the ongoing constitutionality of recording laws like that. I'm not a lawyer, I'm not an expert, but that is something that people watching this might be interested to know, that there are a lot of developments there. So I definitely agree with you. I think the time is certainly ripe. I've every call for those unjust and very anti-free speech charges to be dropped is really important right now, because I think people have a right to speak and to publish information of public significance, and people shouldn't be afraid to do that. We're a better society and a stronger civilization if people can speak openly and people can access critical information on issues of public concern.
How much have you spent already on your defense?
You know, I don't have the total numbers off the top of my head, but the public has been very, very generous with me and my organization and our council over the years, and I don't know that it would have been possible to continue fighting for the truth of what we've uncovered on the Undercover videos, to continue our ongoing investigative reporting, and to continue fighting against Planned Parenthood and the abortion industry in the courtroom and in the court of public opinion. That would not be possible without the really generous support of the public that I think believes in this cause. So I'm very, very grateful and humbled by that.
Are they continuing to move forward on the felony charges? Or charge? Is it one charge?
The state of California so far has refused to drop this case so far. It's gone through several different state attorneys general now, but it was launched by Kamala Harris. There's some very interesting discovery documentation that has recently been produced by the attorney general in that case that definitely implicates the vice president, and to a degree that was not necessarily known before. Hopefully more of that will come out in the near future, but so far that case is still active.
And then I was just wondering, when you were talking about late-term abortion being illegal, I'm actually from the state of Illinois. Our governor has made Illinois a destination state, not for business, not for vacations, but for abortion. And we have no limits on abortion there. Also, they go around parents, so minors can attain abortions in Illinois without parental consent or oversight or counseling. But how is it that, or how do you define a late-term abortion?
Well, I think abortion industry people wouldn't even say the word late-term abortion. They would say later abortion now, and that is also kind of undefined. But I think one important milestone when talking to the public about abortions in later trimesters is viability. People still really care that whether or not a baby can survive outside of the womb on their own. And the viability standard is right now between 21 and 22 weeks. And so generally when I'm thinking of later abortion, I'm thinking of abortion past 20 weeks.
And do you know how many women have died because of Planned Parenthood's dangerous late-term abortions? And then the careless use of the mifepristone?
I do not know exactly how many women have lost their lives, but we know that as abortion proceeds later in pregnancy, that it becomes more and more dangerous. And I think that you're going to see, many more deaths from women who have undergone abortions past 20 weeks than you will before.
And then I'm sure that this Planned Parenthood is using taxpayer money, right, to do all this?
Yeah, absolutely. Planned Parenthood has tried for many years to claim that their taxpayer funding doesn't have anything to do with their abortion business, which is really, it's just a complete lie and fraud for them to try to say that. The abortion clinics, keep the lights on using their taxpayer subsidies. They pay the abortion doctors using their taxpayer subsidies. In states like California, they do directly bill the Medicaid program for even the procedure billing for the abortion itself. But Planned Parenthood's entire infrastructure is shaped around being an industrial scale abortion business. And so whenever they are when they are lavishly supported by the federal government, that's what it's supporting.
Well, I want to thank you both for shining light into the darkness and what you're doing. Proverbs 6 says that there's 6 things that God hates. One is a lying tongue, and the other is hands that shed innocent blood. And I just thank you so much for standing up.
Yeah. Thank you very much. let's see, Ms. Bukovinac, I'd like to ask you a few questions about the Curtis Bay Medical Waste company. Now, you had stated earlier in your testimony that when you found this box, the truck that was picking up the box outside the abortion clinic here in Washington, D.C., was picking it up, and the truck in the pictures you showed said Curtis Bay Medical Waste, and it also said energy. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
So Curtis Bay operates an incinerator in the Baltimore area, and that incinerator creates renewable energy for the city. They recently, since this discovery, have been fined more than $1 million for illegally burning medical waste. My understanding is that the law in Maryland prevents them from burning certain types of medical waste, fetal remains being explicitly one of those. But they've been caught breaking those rules multiple times. They're supposed to burn everything that they're burning until it is ash, but they were just burning it halfway and doing it for profit. So we know that they've been hiding certain things. And right after we made this discovery, they immediately changed their website. It originally had said Cradle to Grave Services. They changed it a few times right after the discovery and claimed that they had no part in this. But we know that they were absolutely taking this box to their incinerator.
Well, there's two parties involved, obviously, the abortion clinic and then Curtis Bay as well. Can we pull that picture back up? Do you have that slide where it shows? Yeah, that one. Was there more than one box? And you only kept how many boxes?
We took one. It was extremely heavy. It was very difficult to carry, but he allowed us to take one. There were two there on the dolly, and then I have another picture that isn't included here of one that he had just loaded onto the truck. So there were 3 boxes the same size coming from the Washington Surgery Center that day.
And they were loaded onto this truck, and the truck drove away, correct?
Yes, except that one of them remained with Lauren and I.
Okay, now under the NIH Revitalization Act of 1993, it is unlawful for any person to knowingly acquire, receive, or otherwise transfer any human fetal tissue for valuable consideration if the transfer affects interstate commerce. This truck would have driven out of the District of Columbia into Maryland, correct?
That's correct.
And this Curtis Bay Medical Waste is located in Baltimore, is that correct?
Yes.
That certainly is interstate commerce. Is now when they take these boxes to the incinerator, is this to provide energy? Is this to create energy for customers of Curtis Bay?
Yes, it makes money for
Energy?
Curtis Bay by burning the material to change it into renewable energy.
Thank you. I want to take a second to, can we put up the slide of the humanized mice? The slide of the baby scalps sewn onto the backs of rodents, please. And this is at the University of Pittsburgh. And this is from, Mr. Daleiden, is it 2020?
This is from a study published by University of Pittsburgh professors in late 2020, I believe.
Late, okay. And according to the information I have here, scalps were taken from aborted babies at gestational age of 18 to 20 weeks of pregnancy at the Maggie Women's Hospital and the University of Pittsburgh Health Sciences Tissue Bank. Is that correct?
That's correct.
What age is viability for a baby that's born premature?
With modern cutting edge medical technology, viability is at just around 20 weeks now, 5 months.
So these are scalps taken from babies. Had they been given the opportunity to live or been provided medical care, they could have possibly survived. Is that correct?
Some of the bigger ones, possibly, yes.
So in 2021, Judicial Watch and the Center of Medical Progress, CMP, announced that they received 252 pages of new documents from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services that revealed nearly $3 million in federal funds were spent on the University of Pittsburgh's quest to become a tissue hub for human fetal tissues ranging from 6 to 42 weeks gestation. Full-term baby is 40 weeks. Could you elaborate on that a little bit?
Sure. So, so the FOIA documents that CMP obtained a couple of years ago from HHS and NIH are specifically for the Good Map program, which was a special NIH program. It's actually still going on. A special NIH program for aborted fetal kidney harvesting from late-term aborted babies, and the University of Pittsburgh submitted a grant application to the NIH in 2016 to become the national distribution hub for the late-term aborted baby kidneys to NIH projects all around the country. University of Pittsburgh has been a major hub for fetal experimentation for decades and decades and decades, going back even before abortion was legal. There's actually archival footage on YouTube that people can watch of live fetal experimentation that was documented at the University of Pittsburgh as early as the 1950s. It's quite disturbing. But so the University of Pittsburgh submitted their grant application to the NIH in 2016 to become the distribution hub for the aborted baby kidney project in 2016, that they were going to run through their Health Sciences Tissue Bank, which I think has now been renamed to the Pitt Biospecimen Core. But it's basically the fetal tissue harvesting bank that the University of Pittsburgh has run for many, many years. The abortion services and the abortion training program at University of Pittsburgh are run by Planned Parenthood abortion providers. So it's Planned Parenthood abortion doctors, taxpayer-funded Planned Parenthood abortion doctors who are running the abortion services at McGee, at the University of Pittsburgh, and supplying the aborted fetal body parts both for the NIH Good Map program and for the fetal scalp experiment that we see on the slide right now. And through further FOIA documentation that we received in the past year or so, NIH emails with research officials at the University of Pittsburgh disclose that the HHS Office of Inspector General has actually opened an investigation of the tissue bank at the University of Pittsburgh. It's been 3 years, as I said in my opening statement, since Congress requested that investigation to be opened, and there's been no public update from the OIG yet about what they've discovered or what they're finding.
Of course not. Thank you for explaining that. So here's something that I find interesting, and I don't understand this at all. The documents also showed that Pitt's proposal further included a racial target for harvesting of human fetal parts. Of its planned aborted subjects, Pitt desired 50% to be minority fetuses. The proposal suggests that subjects be diverse and be of an appropriate racial mix because Pittsburgh is diverse. So they wanted the babies that were killed and their fetal parts that they had harvested to be reflective of Pittsburgh's diversity. But however, the numbers say otherwise. It's really interesting. If you look up the U.S. Census Bureau, shows that Pittsburgh is close to 70% white. So why would they want a 50% minority sampling of baby organs and baby parts that had been aborted when Pittsburgh is about 70% white? Make this make sense. It makes no sense at all to me.
It's one of the most distressing parts of this grant application, and it's I don't know if it's possible to understand it, but the University of Pittsburgh, as basically a diversity and inclusion bonus or benefit of its grant proposal, advertised to the NIH that a benefit of the way that it was going to execute on this grant proposal was that it was going to disproportionately target minority women and infants for its late-term aborted baby kidney harvesting program. It's extremely distressing.
It's repulsive. It's horrifying, actually. I'd like to recognize Congressman Chip Roy from Texas.
Thank you. I just first want to thank Congresswoman Greene for her leadership in putting this together. We need to be doing more of this, and thank her for her leadership on a number of different issues, this January 6th and other things that we've not done enough for with respect to hearings and exposing for the American people the truth. And this is one of those areas, one of the issues. It's not a direct criticism of any member. It's just kind of the way this place works or doesn't work. So I applaud you and appreciate you doing it. And sorry for being late. I had a conflict that went late. Don't want to repeat anything, but didn't catch the first portion of this. But I just want to thank the two of you for being here, and thank the two of you for what you've done to bring to light so many of these important issues, particularly over the last decade, as we've sort of the brutal truth of the abortion industry is becoming more understood, which many have known but didn't have the ability to see. And thanks to you all, they're sadly seeing the sheer brutality that that Congresswoman Greene was just alluding to. A couple of quick questions. One, more specifically, back to the I just kind of hate just saying DC-5 because it becomes like a term as opposed to 5 human beings. But I understand what we're trying to do with respect to that issue. And again, if it's already been covered, forgive me. But for my purposes, I want to be able to ask these questions. But it's still true that no independent examination outside of the DC Medical Examiner's Office has been conducted. Is that correct?
To my knowledge, yes, that's correct.
And why is that problematic? Just in short order, why is that? Why do you see that as a problem?
Because there are very likely federal crimes that have been committed here, and the DOJ is spending their time instead prosecuting and jailing my friends for totally peaceful, nonviolent direct action, when instead they should be going after killers who are committing federal crimes.
And so on that point, right, I mean, what we have is that a spokeswoman from the DC police stated that the determination was based on the on-scene investigation conducted by the Office of the Chief Medical Examiner, correct?
That's correct.
Right. But nothing else. And not to harp on it, but I just want this to be clear for the record, because people need to know that, and that there's a bit of a conflict of interest there, with that being the only source for whether the laws were followed, correct?
Yes.
And specifically to what you said, and again, forgive me if it's repeating anything that was discussed earlier, we believe, based on the information before us now, in terms of what you all have been able to uncover, that there's virtually no way that the laws were actually followed, and that in fact there was evidence of late-term abortion, correct?
Yes, late-term abortion in and of itself isn't necessarily
Right.
a federal crime, but leaving a baby to die after they've been born is, and so is partial birth abortion, and those seem extremely likely for at least 3 of the DC-5.
And can you, again, if this has been covered, forgive me, can you explain for my purposes specifically why you believe that?
The two that are in totally intact condition, they were very old in terms of their gestational age. They were very advanced. We're looking at, experts have put them around 30 weeks or more.
Which, as you said, late term isn't itself necessarily a crime.
Right.
But go ahead.
But leaving a baby to die after they've been born alive is. Now, I explained in my opening statement that without the use of feticides, a feticidal injection like digoxin, according to pro-choice sources like the Society of Family Planning and the University of Vienna, the rate of infants being born alive, if they are induced medically, like through a labor induction, is 50%. So that automatically raises the question of what happens if they are born alive. And the abortion provider that works at the Washington Surgery Center has actually said on camera about 10 years ago that if that happened, that he would not help the baby in that case. So we have very strong reason to believe that any babies that are medically induced in his practice that are born alive don't leave that facility alive.
What do you believe should be the next step in investigating and pursuing the truth?
I think Congress should subpoena the bodies of the babies. They should subpoena Lauren to come testify. I believe that Santangelo should testify, and there should be very thorough hearings.
Switching topics for the sake of time, we can always come back. Quick question. You and I have discussed in the past, you don't come at this from a particular ideological perspective, do you? Or maybe you do, but let me just put it this way. You and I aren't necessarily politically aligned on a lot of issues. Is that correct?
That's correct.
The point being, your perspective and what you have here is not being driven by any political ideology. Is that a fair characterization?
That's a fact.
But rather a concern for life.
Yes.
So I said that as a precedent now for both of you for questions that you might have expertise on, and Mr. Daleiden, you might have more on this case. But in general terms, and a lot have been asked about NIH and some of the issues involved, and obviously the universities, and Ms. Greene covered that pretty thoroughly. Again, not sure if you already covered this, but I'm concerned about federal dollars and what they're being used for and where they're being directed and where they're headed. So do you all have any way to characterize the extent to which or how much taxpayer money the NIH has spent on what I'll characterize broadly as fetal experimentation, say within the last year or over the last 5 years or some other framework? And again, forgive me if you've covered this already.
No, go ahead.
Yeah. Either one of you.
Sure. So as Terrisa mentioned pointed out in her opening statement, actually, just in the past year, for the most recent numbers that the NIH self-reports, they spent $57 million on fetal experimentation. I have serious concerns that the NIH's public reporting of those numbers are not accurate, because there are plenty of examples that my organization and other citizen researchers have uncovered where there were either major NIH grants or major research studies published using aborted fetal body parts, or other fetal experimentation projects that we have examples of, where the NIH grants that supported them are not included in that public NIH database on the NIHreport.gov website. So, for example, we've been talking about the baby scalping experiment at the University of Pittsburgh. That was supported by multiple NIH grants, one of them from Dr. Fauci's NIAID office. Those grants are not reported in the NIH human fetal tissue categorization on the nih.report.gov website. And that's just one very prominent example. They were using NIH grants to scalp 5-month-old babies and stitch the scalps onto lab rats, and that's for some reason not categorized as a human fetal experimentation project. So I think that, there were.
So that's not, to be clear, categorized in what you described in a minute ago as the $57 million number. Is that an annual figure?
Correct. That's what I'm saying.
So you're saying a $57 million annual figure that presumably flows through and from HHS funding predominantly,
yeah.
Which, by the way, is on the docket to be voted on this week. I would point out to my colleagues generally, but particularly my Republican colleagues. So that $57 million annual amount is not inclusive of what you just described as an observation with respect to NIAID and Fauci and what we just talked about with the scalps. Is that correct?
Correct. It does not seem to capture all of the fetal experimentation money that's being spent.
That's 57 million. I think we could cut.
I think that's right. Do you have anything to add to any of that with respect to the taxpayer funding or any of that?
It's 57 million is actually one of the lowest years. If there were some years, I think on that chart that I showed, where it was like well over 100 million. But I think that David's point is really important, that they are hiding some of that money, and we need to make sure that there is oversight to that.
So to be clear, and I'll pass it back over, is in addition to whatever Congress is voting on this week in particular, we've got about half of our budget, Department of Defense, State and Foreign Operations, we've got HHS and other Department of Homeland Security. There are significant measures that we will be voting on that are abortion related, specifically abortion tourism at the Pentagon, for example. But this is, we're talking about here in terms of experimentation, which is beyond funding the abortion industry specifically for carrying out abortions. or marketing or do whatever they're doing to carry out abortions, but rather the experimentation that's going wrong with this industry broadly. I'm trying to like clarify for the record that this is what we're funding. So when we vote on this stuff, these are the kinds of things we're voting to fund. And I think that merits a great deal of focus for our colleagues. So I appreciate that. Last question for you, Mr. Daleiden. I was the first assistant attorney general in Texas in 2015. And you might understand why that is a year that is important. I had to sit and watch a lot of videos, all of them that we had in our possession. One of the things that has been raised over the years by my colleagues and others and obviously was litigated in court, was the question of the veracity of the findings by virtue of the methods by which the information was acquired. Can you just speak a little bit to that about what has been uncovered and the methods to uncover them and the veracity of what was uncovered, irrespective of some of the allegations or characterizations of it? If that makes sense?
Sure. Yeah. At the end of the day, the video camera doesn't lie. The footage that I and my fellow undercover investigators recorded was recorded on police quality, law enforcement quality undercover equipment. We provided all of we've provided all of that footage to certainly to Congress under subpoena and to other law enforcement agencies when they requested it. Planned Parenthood has actually stipulated in a sworn court stipulation that the individuals captured and recorded on the footage did indeed speak the words that they are recorded speaking on the video footage. These people, I think the Planned Parenthood officials who are shown on the tapes ought to themselves be subpoenaed and be questioned under oath about their statements. There's been a little bit of that done so far in deposition testimony and other work, some of which is actually public, which CMP has reported on. And it's very interesting once you put the leadership of the abortion industry under oath and you show them these tapes and you ask them about those talking points about saying, heavily edited, which I still don't know if that means, the subtitles were too big or we put the subtitles on the tapes were too bold or something. But you ask them about those talking points and they backtrack pretty quickly when they're under oath because the video camera doesn't lie.
Thank you. And I'll say anything to add to the methods with respect to finding some of this information and what you all, have had to do in the same category and that this stuff's coming to light because of those actions. Anything you have to add about those methods?
I think it's just absolutely shameful that over the last 8 years, we have had to battle with these universities over records requests, that we have had to do all of this investigation as private citizens when the DOJ has had all of this information all along. The DOJ knows that fetal tissue research relies on born alive infants in some cases, and yet there has been no action taken. So that has been incredibly frustrating, but that's why this moment is so important to David and I, the fact that we are finally getting this on the congressional record and hopefully move this forward and get some justice for these children.
Last question, I promise. FACE Act.
Repeal it.
So you have 3 supporters of doing that here, I'm sure. But can you just articulate, and this is the final question, articulate the extent to which the FACE Act has been used politically to target certain individuals versus others and how that has impacted you all? And again, forgive me if it's repetitive.
Yeah, the FACE Act was enacted in '94 to suppress pro-life activism. Ultimately, it was a response to everyday Americans going to abortion facilities, places where the killing is happening, while the killing is happening, and putting their bodies in between the killers and the baby. And the FACE Act was very effective in shutting down that type of activism because it basically made pro-life activism a federal crime. And my colleagues are literally in jail right now under the FACE Act for totally nonviolent, peaceful sit-ins that are similar to many other social justice movements. And those people are not facing these kinds of charges. And the FACE Act was originally pitched to protect churches and pregnancy centers as well. But what we're seeing is the total weaponization of this law, that it has been used hundreds of times against peaceful pro-lifers. And I think it's been used twice against violent pro-abortion activists. So there's just a total unequal application of this law. It was designed to oppress us. It is oppressing us, and pro-life activism should be legal in this country again.
Is it right that it's about 130 something to maybe 3 roughly under the Biden administration? Isn't that roughly correct in terms of FACE Act applications directed towards pro-lifers versus other?
Yes.
Thank you. I yield back.
Wow, that's a staggering statistic. Thank you very much. Talking about your friends that are sitting in jail right now, there's 9 of them. Is that correct?
Yes.
And can you just describe what they did? Like, what did they do? Did they physically grab a woman to stop her from having an abortion? Did they attack a nurse, a doctor? Did they cause any kinds of damage to the abortion facility itself?
They did not. They did a sit-in at the abortion center, totally peaceful, non-violently. Some people are Christians and were praying. Others were, talking to moms in the elevator. Some were outside counseling moms. This was just a pretty standard sit-in for any other type of justice movement.
Kind of like when the Ceasefire Now activists come and they come into our buildings, and they like the Cannon building where my office is, they come and they sit in and they have their protest. A couple times they have gotten a little bit violent with Capitol Police, only a few times, but then they're all removed. None of them are sitting in jail, and none of them have been prosecuted like your friends have. How many years in jail are your friends facing once they have their sentencing hearings?
So they were taken to jail immediately when they were convicted, which was quite a surprise. And that was in August. They've been in jail since then, and they will be there until May when their sentencing happens. At that time, each of them are facing 11 years in federal prison.
That's incredible. Certainly we will pray for them. It shouldn't be that way. And we will repeal the FACE Act if we can get our opportunity. I know each of us definitely would. Let's switch gears and talk about women for a minute. How much is the average abortion? Either of you, I don't know. How much would it cost?
The latest figures from Planned Parenthood and from the Guttmacher Institute, which is basically the research arm, the public policy research arm of Planned Parenthood, would put the average abortion price anywhere from $550 to up to $800. It sort of depends on whether it's being done at an independent abortion center where it might be a little cheaper, or if it's a chemical abortion drug abortion being done at a Planned Parenthood, where they tend to mark it up a little bit more, and it's closer to $800.
The abortions at Santangelo's clinic past a certain point run into the over $10,000.
Is that for a late term abortion?
I would say abortions probably past 24 weeks are going to be 10,000 and above.
Extremely expensive. One of the forms here that the Judicial Watch got from their FOIA shows the cost or the prices of livers. Now this is back in 2012. So I mean, imagine inflation has driven that price up, right? I'm sure it's a lot more. And it says they're $580 each. $580. So if a woman is paying somewhere around $500 to $800, for an abortion, up to $10,000 for an abortion, then we have the abortion clinic getting paid handily, probably now thousands of dollars for organs. Is that correct?
Yes, and so many of these patients are being just totally exploited by this industry. Months before Lauren and I recovered this box, we were at the Washington Surgery Center. We met a mom inside who was facing an eviction, and she was literally there for an abortion because she was going to get evicted from her apartment. We were able to connect her with another organization that helped do the heavy lifting fundraising, get her rent paid, and she walked out of the abortion clinic that day. There are so many parents here in DC who feel that they have no other option, and then they end up in a place like Santangelo's where he is going to exploit them for his own personal profit.
It's lucrative business, the abortion industry is.
Yes.
So here we have women, and I don't know a statistical number for this, but women who are obviously in a crisis, likely financially, maybe their living situation, maybe their life choices, and they're obviously going to an abortion clinic because they feel they have no other choice, is usually the standard situation. Wouldn't you say that is the case?
More often than not, yes.
Yes, more often than not. Not every case, but more often than not. And then here, the information provided publicly is that this abortion is a solution to solve their problems, where there are so many other wonderful solutions that can be provided to women in crisis so that they don't have to have an abortion. Just being a believer in humanity and a believer in people's goodness on the inside, I cannot imagine that hardly any of these women or young women, I mean, we even heard on one of these clips, being as young as 16 years old, in their worst nightmares could ever imagine that the baby that they chose to have an abortion is being dismembered, being cut open alive for their organs to be harvested and then to be sold for profit. I think this is the information that every single American should hear, and this is the information that needs to be known. I have a question for both of you. Now, if you're, let's say that the three of us up here are business partners and we have a restaurant. And so people that come to our restaurant can obviously write reviews about the service and how our restaurant is. And then there's people that, that come in and will have to and look at our kitchen and make sure our kitchen is safe, make sure that we're meeting all the standards. Is there any type of regulatory agency that is a watchdog, so to speak, on abortion clinics? Is there something like that in existence?
No, I don't believe so. And I think a good example of this is the case of Dr. Kermit Gosnell in Philadelphia in the early 2010s. He was prosecuted for snipping the backs of the necks of several, probably thousands of babies throughout his career who were born alive and left to die. And he had committed many crimes before that. He had killed women. He had been improperly prescribing medication. I believe all of the local institutions that would have been in a position to intervene failed to. And when the grand jury wrote their report, they cited that they believed that was probably because they didn't want to stigmatize abortion or abortion providers. It wasn't until the DEA actually went in on some drug charges where they ended up doing the investigation and exposed what he had been doing. But there is so little oversight for any of this. This is how Santangelo continues to operate. You see the mayor and the DC police literally saying, nothing to see here. There's literally no oversight.
Yeah, the Philadelphia grand jury report in the Kermit Gosnell case in 2011 or 2012 specifically found that the Pennsylvania Department of Health had refused to investigate the numerous complaints that had been made over 17 years about Kermit Gosnell's clinic, because they felt that investigating the complaints and enforcing the existing regulations on the books at Kermit Gosnell's clinic would imperil so-called abortion access for the rest of the state of Pennsylvania. And so because of the aggressive pro-abortion political ideology of the state government at the time, Kermit Gosnell went uninspected, was allowed to continue his crime spree for almost 20 years, where he was delivering third trimester babies alive and killing them after they were born by snipping their spinal cords at his clinic. And he did that for 17 years until it took a federal drug bust investigation to discover what he was really doing. So if that's what was going on in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, imagine what's going on in other places across the country. It's an absolute disgrace that there's not the strictest enforcement of existing laws and regulations when it comes to a life or death industry like abortion.
Absolutely. That makes a lot of sense. And so it's more of I was going to say a veil of privacy, but it's actually more like my goodness, the strongest building possible of that creates it's more secrecy. And then you add in the incentive, the financial incentive of harvesting organs, harvesting baby body parts that happens behind these secretive walls, is astounding. And that there's no watchdog group, there's no one coming in making sure that they aren't doing these things, and they confess at these conferences over drinks and food. That is exactly what they're doing. It's absolutely horrific. Congresswoman Miller, do you want to take a few minutes?
Sure. So in Illinois, Medicaid covers abortion. How many states, do either of you know how many states Medicaid is covering abortion services?
That's a good question.
I think it's a little bit over a dozen. It might be I think it's somewhere between 12 and 17. The last time I looked at the numbers.
So number one, we're forced to fund Planned Parenthood through our tax dollars. And then we're forced to fund it through Medicaid. And then I'm sure you would agree that when women find themselves in the situation, whatever is driving them to do it, this is an incentive. It's incentivizing them to get the abortion because it's covered medically. And then also in Illinois, I believe that they're forcing a lot of insurance providers to cover it, which is unbelievable that this is happening.
That is terrible.
Yeah, and and even worse, the market for aborted baby body parts incentivizes the clinics and the people who work in the clinics to make sure that certain abortions happen in order to supply the experimental demand for the body parts. So it basically adds a second level of abortion quotas to the clinic's operations. So it's been widely reported over the past several years that Planned Parenthood explicitly sets abortion quotas for its clinics, where there's a certain number that they have to meet quarterly for their revenues. If they're selling body parts on top of that, there's an additional layer of quotas that gets added because certain abortions at certain gestational ages, and even down to targeting specific patients, like we see in the Pittsburgh grant application, those abortions have to happen in order to fulfill the quotas.
So the collecting of cord blood, can it be used in the same scientific ways that they're using? I mean, can't that be used for these science and medical?
Absolutely. I mean, the some of the so-called humanized mouse and humanized rat studies, do sound very Dr. Frankenstein, but it's possible to humanize the immune system of an immunodeficient mouse using full-term cord blood, using the stem cells from full-term cord blood, as opposed to harvesting late-term baby livers and thymus and kidneys in order to do it. So you can experimentally so-called humanize the immune system of a rodent using cord blood from a healthy full-term delivery that doesn't kill anybody.
How much better it would be if our government subsidized the collection of cord blood and we had these big banks of cord blood, like for all kinds of medical procedures.
Thank you. If they're scientists and they're good scientists, you'd think they'd be able to do that, right? Yeah. It's shocking. My question is this: how does this stop? I feel like if all of this information is put into the public, the public opinion would change. Terrisa, you're a Democrat. Are all Democrat women staunchly pro-choice and pro-abortion? Is that true?
No, it's not. 4 in 10 Democrats believe abortion should be limited to the first trimester. I think one of the main barriers that we have to reaching leftists is that many just don't believe that abortions past 20 weeks for elective reasons are even happening. And they think that it's just made up. But it's all there in black and white in the NIH studies. It's all very real. But none of that really compares to how real it was for me when I literally held them in my own hands.
So do you think it's a lack of information, a lack of knowledge, just the fact that the American people have no idea the truth of the abortion industry?
I think that that's a lot of it. I think, a lot of it has to do with political identity. And, we've seen studies that suggest that people's ideology doesn't form their politics. It's the politics that form the ideology. And so if they feel like I personally had negative feelings about abortion for nearly 10 years before I said I'm pro-life, because I thought I'm not pro-life because I'm not a religious conservative. So there's so much about the identity of being pro-life that leftists feel they can't fit into. But I think it's really important that we show that the pro-life movement is incredibly diverse. It is literally for everyone. And it's so important for leftists and Democrats and socialists to step up and say, this is mass murder. This is not something that is supported even through our own leftist lens, that our own leftist lens calls upon us to protect the marginalized. And we have thrown these babies to the wolves.
So well spoken. This has to be the most least political issue when we're talking about humanity. We're talking about human lives.
This is genocide. This is something that we all need to oppose.
Absolutely. Well, the statistics are over 63 million people have been murdered in the womb. And if the statistics are true, right? Abortion has been legal in the United States of America since 1973. That's longer than I've been alive. Longer than you've been alive. It's been happening for so long, and it is genocide. I fully agree with you. And I believe there's a true lack of information due to the fact that they are covering this up and hiding it. And for the obvious reasons, if people really knew, really understood what an abortion really is, which I think is the most important conversation we can have. By the way, I want you to know we invited every single Republican member of Congress. I invited every single Democrat member on my oversight committee. Some of those include Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez from New York, Rashida Tlaib, and they include many different women from the Democrat side of the aisle in Congress. None of them were willing to show up, in spite of the fact they constantly want to talk about so-called women's reproductive rights, which is abortion. I think this is such an important issue to engage on. But if we're going to talk about it, we have to really talk about exactly what it is in the most worst, goriest detail, because that's what it is. It truly is gory, horrific, barbaric, but apparently very lucrative. And I think that's the most disturbing side of it, other than it kills a human being. I feel so sorry for so many women that have been through an abortion and they have no idea what it really is. And I think that's many women, especially young women. I think many young women go in and have an abortion thinking that they're desperately trying to solve a so-called problem they have, when really that so-called problem would be the greatest blessing of their life. I think Mary and I both can say that, being mothers. It's probably the greatest job. And grandma, yes. And it's probably the greatest unplanned journey any woman could take of her entire life, because there's nothing but blessings that come from it. And that's what I would tell any woman, even thinking about it. And then obviously, as you've stated, there's so many options and there's so many resources and there's so many people willing to help, not only financially, but providing, baby clothes to baby furniture to helping them find a job. The opportunities are endless when women choose life. But what we see today and what we've learned from both of you, and I thank you both for having the bravery and the courage to come here and tell these stories, because they come with a price. 9 of your friends are in jail and you are facing jail time as well. But I truly thank you. And I believe that there's a great reward for your courage and the information that you're providing. And of course, I think many people watching this will pray for you both and pray for this information to go wide and beyond, because when the truth comes out, that's where changes can be made. And that's why we're holding this hearing today, to begin to make changes. And the biggest change that needs to be made is there should be no baby slaughtered in their mother's womb, or partially born and slaughtered barbarically for their body parts to be sold. And that's something that I can't imagine any American disagreeing with that. It's not possible. If you put it out there to the American people, they will agree with us fully. So this is going to conclude our hearing today. Thank you very much. I hope people watching at home will share this and engage in our offices. Thank you.